The Vietnam War, even the name evokes powerful emotions. It was a conflict that spanned nearly 2 decades from 1955 to 1975 and left an indelible mark on both the United States and Vietnam. The war's impact was felt not only on the battlefield, but also in the hearts and minds of those who lived through it. Images of helicopters silhouetted against a jungle backdrop, their rotors slicing through the humid air, became iconic symbols of the war. These helicopters were not just machines. They were lifelines for soldiers, providing supplies, evacuating the wounded, and offering a fleeting sense of security in an otherwise hostile environment. Young soldiers, many of them barely out of high school, marched off to an uncertain fate. They were thrust into a world of chaos and violence far removed from the comforts of home. Their bravery and sacrifice are remembered, but so too are the psychological scars that many carried with them. Long after the war ended back home, the conflict sparked protests and unrest on college campuses across the nation. Students, activists, and ordinary citizens took to the streets, demanding an end to the conflict. The anti-war movement became a powerful force, challenging the government's policies and questioning the morality of the war. It was a conflict that divided a nation, pitted brother against brother, and left an enduring legacy of pain, loss, and unanswered questions. Families were torn apart, friendships were strained, and the nation grappled with the profound consequences of its involvement in Vietnam. For the United States, Vietnam was a watershed moment, a turning point in its role as a global superpower. The war exposed the limits of American military might and forced the nation to confront its own vulnerabilities. It was a humbling experience that reshaped U.S. foreign policy for decades to come. It was a war fought not on distant battlefields, but in living rooms across America. Broadcast nightly on the evening news, the graphic images and reports brought the brutal realities of war into the homes of millions, forever changing the way Americans perceived conflict. The war challenged fundamental assumptions about American power, its role in the world, and the very nature of war itself. It prompted a national debate about the ethics of intervention, the limits of military force, and the responsibilities of a superpower. The Vietnam War was more than just a military conflict. It was a clash of ideologies, a struggle for the hearts and minds of a people yearning for self-determination. The war pitted the communist North Vietnamese and their allies against the South Vietnamese government and its principal ally, the United States. It was a war that exposed the complexities of international relations, the limits of military power, and the enduring human cost of conflict. The strategies and decisions made during the war had far-reaching implications, influencing global politics and military tactics for years to come. Even today, decades after the last helicopter lifted off the roof of the American embassy in Saigon, the Vietnam War continues to shape our understanding of the world. The images of that final evacuation are seared into our collective memory, symbolizing the end of an era and the beginning of a long process of healing and reflection. It serves as a stark reminder of the human toll of war, the importance of diplomacy, and the need for thoughtful engagement in international affairs. The Vietnam War memorials, with their long lists of names, stand as silent witnesses to the sacrifices made and the lessons learned. They remind us of the cost of conflict and the enduring need for peace. To truly understand the Vietnam War, one must delve into the complex history of Vietnam itself. This history is a tapestry woven with threads of resilience, resistance, and an unyielding desire for self-determination. For centuries, Vietnam had been ruled by a succession of foreign powers. Most recently, the French established the colony of French Indochina. In the late 19th century, the French sought to exploit Vietnam's rich resources, imposing their culture and governance on the Vietnamese people. French rule was marked by exploitation, cultural suppression, and a rigid social hierarchy that relegated the Vietnamese people to second-class status. The French imposed heavy taxes, forced labor, and monopolized the economy, leaving the Vietnamese with little control over their own lives. The desire for independence burned brightly in the hearts of many Vietnamese. This yearning was not just a political aspiration, but a deeply personal and cultural one. The Vietnamese people longed to reclaim their identity and heritage, which had been systematically eroded by colonial rule. They yearned for the right to govern themselves, to preserve their cultural heritage, and to build a better future for their children. The traditional ceremonies and family structures that had been the bedrock of Vietnamese society were under threat, and this only fueled the desire for self-governance. This desire for self-determination, coupled with the oppressive nature of French rule, created a fertile ground for resistance. Secret meetings were held, and revolutionary ideas began to spread like wildfire among the oppressed populace. As the 20th century dawned, a new generation of Vietnamese leaders emerged, determined to throw off the yoke of colonialism. Figures like Ho Chi Minh and others became symbols of the struggle, inspiring countless others to join the cause. Inspired by nationalist movements around the world, these leaders recognized that the path to independence lay in uniting the Vietnamese people and confronting French rule. They drew lessons from the successes and failures of other movements, adapting their strategies to the unique challenges faced by Vietnam. The seeds of conflict were sown, setting the stage for a long and bloody struggle for freedom that would eventually draw in the United States and plunge Vietnam into decades of war. The struggle for independence was not just a fight against colonial powers, but a battle for the soul of the nation, a quest to reclaim a lost heritage and build a future freed from oppression. Throughout this tumultuous period, the Vietnamese people held on to their cultural traditions and values. Festivals, music, and art became acts of resistance, ways to preserve their identity amidst the chaos of war. These cultural expressions were not just celebrations, but declarations of resilience and hope. Today, the legacy of this struggle is evident in the vibrant culture and resilient spirit of modern Vietnam. The sacrifices made by countless individuals have paved the way for a nation that stands proud and independent, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. As we reflect on the history of French Indochina and the struggle for independence, we are reminded of the strength and determination of the Vietnamese people. Their journey from colonial rule to independence is a powerful story of courage, unity, and the unbreakable will to be free. At the forefront of the Vietnamese independence movement stood a charismatic and enigmatic figure named Ho Chi Minh. Born in 1890, Ho Chi Minh would become a symbol of Vietnamese nationalism, a revered leader who embodied the aspirations of his people. Ho Chi Minh's journey took him from the rice paddies of Vietnam to the bustling streets of Paris, where he witnessed firsthand the hypocrisy of Western powers espousing democracy while maintaining colonial empires. He embraced communist ideology, seeing in it a path to social justice and national liberation. Returning to Vietnam in the 1940s, Ho Chi Minh galvanized the Vietnamese people with his message of independence and self-reliance. He founded the Viet Minh, a coalition of nationalists and communist groups, to fight for Vietnam's liberation from French rule. Ho Chi Minh's leadership proved instrumental in uniting the Vietnamese people under a common banner. He inspired them with his unwavering commitment to independence, his strategic acumen, and his ability to connect with the aspirations of ordinary Vietnamese. Under his guidance, the Viet Minh became a formidable fighting force, challenging the might of the French Empire. The First Indochina War, which erupted in 1946, pitted the Viet Minh against the French forces seeking to reassert control over their former colony. This conflict was rooted in the broader context of post-World War II decolonization, where many nations sought to break free from European colonial rule. What began as a low-level insurgency quickly escalated into a full-blown war that would drag on for nearly a decade. The French, determined to maintain their grip on Indochina, underestimated the resolve and resourcefulness of the Viet Minh. Though outgunned and outmanned, the Viet Minh employed guerrilla tactics to great effect, using their knowledge of the terrain and the support of the local population to their advantage. They moved stealthily through the dense jungles, launching surprise attacks, and then disappearing into the foliage, making it difficult for the French to mount an effective counteroffensive. They fought with tenacity and determination, inflicting heavy casualties on the French and gradually wearing down their resolve. The French forces, despite their superior firepower and resources, found themselves in a quagmire, unable to secure a decisive victory. The turning point in the war came in 1954 at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. This battle was not just a military engagement, but a strategic gamble by the French to cut off Viet Minh supply lines and force a decisive confrontation. The Viet Minh, under the command of General Vo Nguyen Giap, surrounded and besieged a heavily fortified French outpost in northwestern Vietnam. Giap meticulously planned the siege, amassing troops and artillery in the surrounding hills, effectively cutting off French supply routes and reinforcements. The battle raged for 57 days and nights, culminating in a decisive Viet Minh victory that sent shockwaves around the world. The French garrison, isolated and out of options, was forced to surrender, marking a humiliating defeat for France. Dien Bien Phu marked the end of French colonial rule in Indochina and signaled the rise of Vietnam as a significant player on the world stage. The Geneva Accords, signed shortly after the battle, led to the withdrawal of French forces and the temporary division of Vietnam at the 17th parallel. It also served as a powerful symbol of anti-colonial resistance, inspiring similar movements across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The victory at Dien Bien Phu demonstrated that colonial powers could be defeated, fueling the aspirations of oppressed peoples worldwide to fight for their independence and self-determination. The global reaction to the Viet Minh's victory was profound. Newspapers around the world carried headlines about the fall of Dien Bien Phu, and international leaders took note of the shifting balance of power. The battle became a case study in military academies, illustrating the effectiveness of guerrilla warfare and the importance of understanding local conditions in conflict zones. Today, the legacy of Dien Bien Phu continues to resonate in Vietnam. It is remembered as a pivotal moment in the nation's history, celebrated in museums, and commemorated in annual events. The battle's lessons remain relevant, reminding us of the enduring power of determination in the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds.